Keep sending your feedback. I'll be reading and sampling some of them a bit later on in the program. Our SMS line is 22422 and the hashtag is Newsnight. Now, detectives probing the mysterious deaths of two children whose bodies were discovered in a car parked at the Athi River police station will have to go back to the drawing board to look for clues on what might have caused the death of Alvina Mudheo and Henry Jackton. This follows an inconclusive post-mortem examination conducted by Chief Government Pathologist Johansen Oduor, who said it was difficult to tell the exact cause of death due to the level of decomposition that both bodies had undergone in the car. Speaking at the Chiromo mortuary after a 4-hour autopsy, Oduor said there were no visible injuries or fractured bones to suggest any kind of trauma. Samples from the bodies have been forwarded to the government chemist for further tests to establish the duration the bodies were in the vehicle. Mudheo and Jackton's bodies were discovered in the car last Wednesday after they were reported missing on the 11th of June.
Death of the two children because of the level of decomposition.
And Second Liberation Crusaders and activists led by NARC Kenya Party leader Martha Karua have called on Kenyans to reject any attempts by the Building Bridges initiative to alter the constitution. During this year's Saba Day commemoration, they accused those behind the BBI of selfish attempts to subject the country to a referendum that they say will claw back gains made in the current constitution. Stephen Leto reports.
The BBI report has already been concluded and is now awaiting the handing over to President Uhuru Kenyatta and his handshake partner Raila Odinga by the Yusuf Haji-led team. A group calling itself the Second Liberators, using this year's commemoration of Saba Day to point out that the constitution is in the hands of power-hungry individuals, claiming the BBI with the sole intention of seeking power from the back door.
I support implementation of the Constitution, full implementation, not its cannibalization.
Led by NARC Kenya Party leader Martha Karua, economist David Ndii and anti-graft activist Njeru Kathangu, the team claimed the BBI is seeking to extend term limits in key offices including that of president and governors, and wants Kenyans to reject the proposals in totality.
We will defeat any attempt to remove or alter term limits for holding office in the current constitution, or any attempt to create new offices for current office holders to return through the back door.
The lofty handshake promise of uniting Kenyans has degenerated into a conclave of oligarchs, parceling the country into ethnic fiefdoms whose only evident purpose is personal power.
The Yusuf Haji-led BBI team is now awaiting a date from the president to hand over the final BBI document. Some of the proposals during the second round of public hearings include changes in the system of governance, as well as increase in the gender equation and boosting allocations to counties to at least 45% of audited national revenues. The Yusuf Haji team received proposals to have an extended executive that will include the president, the deputy president, the prime minister, and 2 deputy prime ministers, with a big question centered on whether to go for a powerful prime minister or retain a powerful president. The Senate has also been proposed to be the upper house that will have vetting veto.
I protest because you're killing us.
But as the Saba Day was being commemorated to resist any form of constitutional changes, another faction of the youth in Nairobi flooded the streets of the capital, protesting extrajudicial killings that are on the rise. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Well, let's now speak to a man who's been described as one of the architects of the Saba movement, Honorable Njeru Kathangu, former Member of Parliament for Runyenjes. Honorable Kathangu, thank you for speaking to us on Newsnight. 30 years later, Saba, of course, having achieved its intended purpose, which is multipartyism, some would ask today, especially a much younger generation, why is it important to commemorate this day, Honorable Kathangu?
First of all, it is good for every Kenyan to appreciate that every time we are going through oppression, dictatorships, and if you like, authoritarian tendencies, a society needs to think and retreat back to itself and ask what must be done. After 30 years, we must ask ourselves, what is it that happened on Saba Day? What is it that was being proposed? What is it that the adherents of that movement thought, and whether we have achieved or not achieved? It is important for us to remember Saba was a culmination of a struggle that started in 1969 when Kenya became a de facto one-party state, and is stamped and confirmed in 1982 June when Kenya became a de jure one-party state. And the struggle became bitter and very painful as the dictatorship in Kenya then descended to eliminate, to maim, to detain, and to imprison so many people that went into numbers exceeding 5,000 from 1969 to 1992. It is because of that Kenyans must be reminded and must always keep in memory that suffering so that they do not ever come back to it. And what is happening in Kenya today reminds me that what we were doing in 1991 was repeated in 1981, or rather was replicated from 1981 and was there in 1961. So why would we be going in 2021 to experience the same things that we have come from? That's why we must remember this day.
Honorable Kathangu, you've seen pictures of people on the streets today. Some would say the mission for the Saba movement was achieved. We don't need to see what we've seen today, for example. How do you respond to those who are of that view?
It is that those in government should be able to reflect that there are so many things that makes Kenya dissatisfied, angry, and so bitter because their expectations were never met. I have seen Mother talk about the constitution, thinking about changing the constitution. And the reason is that they think the new constitution takes away some of the greedy intentions, and they would want that is changed so that it becomes easy for them. Nevertheless, Kenyans must also remember that constitutions are not static documents. It is actually supposed to answer and address people's aspirations. And where need be and necessary, constitution must be amended to be able to match people's aspirations. However, the intentions of those that are in power today of the people is like they are against the people, and the people are trying to tell them, listen, think about us. We are here. We are hungry. We are poor. We are needy. And we need the government resources to be equitably distributed. That's all that you are talking about. Because if the leadership is correct, the mwananchi will not bother with them. Kama umelala ukiwa umekula, kwa nini upigane na uzingizi wako sababu ya chakula? If you are 100 shillings in the pocket, and you cannot go stealing a packet of milk that night. That is what the government has for. They are parents to us, and they must care about this nation and the people.
Honorable Kathangu, you've raised the issue of the mwananchi, the ordinary Kenyan citizen. What part do you think they should play today in keeping Saba alive, bearing in mind we don't see the numbers out there as there were in the past?
Yes, you see, one of the things is here that when the government decides to marginalize issues, like, for example, there is no government agent or official who actually thinks about the liberators, freedom fighters, and even those that clamored for multipartism. They actually isolate and segregate them, marginalize them, and in the end, they don't care whether they died or did not die. So the government has got a responsibility. The people also have a responsibility to make sure that you have vigilant, where they forget, where the leaders don't care, where the leaders ignore them. They must come out and demand what is their right. They are the sovereign power. It is not that the opposition and the government, the sovereigns. The sovereigns are the people they rule over. And that must be reminded by the people so that the government does not slip away and forget the people who put them in power.
Honorable Kathangu, thank you so much for capturing the spirit of Saba 30 years on, reflecting on the past, sharing your concerns about the future, and of course your message to Kenyans at this time. And on that note, of course, having spoken to Honorable Njeru Kathangu, considered one of the prime architects in the Saba movement and a former member of parliament for Runyenjes. On that note, we take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be running you through some business, sports as well. And then we'll be looking at the education sector, bearing in mind that announcement, the directive by the Ministry of Education on pushing the school calendar forward to 2021. Effectively, every student in class who would have been in class this year having to repeat that class next year. What are your thoughts on this? 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Newsnight. We'll be having that big discussion shortly. But first, let's take that break. Here's what's coming up.